Rain streaked across the courthouse glass as Claire Monroe signed away her marriage. Her husband didn't even look up from his phone. 1 week later, she lost everything: her baby, her home, her bank accounts emptied overnight. He married her best friend in a ceremony that went viral. 2 million people celebrated their love story. But what they didn't know, Claire had just inherited $2.4 billion. And she was about to teach them both a lesson about underestimating a grieving woman. If you stay until the end, you'll see why the best revenge isn't destruction, it's resurrection. Hit that like button if you believe karma is real. Drop a comment with your thoughts. And subscribe, because stories like this remind us some women don't break. They rebuild empires. This is Claire's story, and it's just beginning. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital emergency room burned like accusations. Claire Vaughn clutched her swollen belly as another wave of pain had tore through her, so intense she couldn't scream. 7 months pregnant. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not now, not like this. "Mrs. Ashford, we need to get you into surgery now," Dr. Catherine Pierce said, her voice tight with urgency. "The baby's heart rate is dropping rapidly." Claire reached for her husband's hand, but Derek Ashford was staring at his phone. 2:47 a.m. A name flashed across the display: Jess, with a red heart emoji. "Derek," Claire gasped. "Please, I need you." He looked up, annoyed. "What, I'm here, aren't I?" His phone buzzed again. Another message from Jess, then another. Dr. Pierce stepped between them. "Mr. Ashford, your wife is hemorrhaging. We're losing the baby's heartbeat. I need you to step out so we can prep for emergency surgery." Derek's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then at Claire, then back. "I need to take this," he muttered, already walking toward the hallway. "Derek!" Claire screamed, but he was gone. Through the thin curtain, she heard his voice drop to an intimate whisper. "Baby, I can't talk right now. I know. Yes, I'll leave her soon. I promise. I love you too." The words hit harder than physical pain. The machines around her started beeping frantically. "We're losing the baby," Dr. Pierce shouted. "Get her to OR3 now." They wheeled Claire down the corridor at a dead run. She twisted her neck, searching for Derek. He stood by the vending machines, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something. Their baby was dying, and he was laughing. In the operating room, the anesthesia pulled her under like dark water. The last thing she heard was the sound that would haunt her forever: the flat, endless tone of a heart monitor when there's no heartbeat left. When she woke 6 hours later, the silence was deafening. No baby crying, no baby no machines monitoring a tiny heartbeat. Just emptiness. The hospital room was empty too. No Derek. Claire's hands moved to her deflated stomach. Gone. The baby was gone. On the chair beside her bed. Derek had left his phone. He'd gone home to shower, according to a note, as if their child dying was just another mess to clean up. Claire reached for the phone with shaking hands. She knew his passcode, their wedding anniversary, 0614. The messages opened like a wound. "Jess, babe, I'm wearing the lingerie you bought me. When are you coming over, Jess? Can't wait till you finally leave that boring wife of yours. Jess, 2 more months till I can post us publicly." Claire scrolled back. Days of messages, weeks, months, photos of Jessica in their beach house, the one Claire had inherited from her mother. Jessica wearing Claire's mother's silk robe. The caption, "Can't wait till this is ours forever." The timestamp 2 nights ago. While Claire had been painting the nursery, Derek had been with Jessica planning their future. Claire kept reading because she needed to know how completely she'd been destroyed. Derek, "Surgery tomorrow might solve our problem naturally. If not, I'll file papers immediately after." Jess, "Is that awful? I feel terrible saying this. But it would be easier if something just happened." Derek, "Don't feel bad. It's nature. Some things aren't meant to be." They'd been hoping for this, hoping their baby would die. Claire made a sound she'd never heard herself make before: something animal and broken. A nurse rushed in, but Claire couldn't speak. She could only stare at the messages, reading them over and over. Her baby was dead. Her husband was a monster. And somewhere in the city, her best friend since college was probably celebrating. The morning sun started creeping through the hospital blinds. Claire closed her eyes and felt the tears come finally. Violent, body-shaking sobs that made her surgical incision scream. A doctor came in and tried to offer condolences, tried to explain what had happened medically. Placental abruption, fetal distress, words that meant her daughter was dead. "Where's my husband?" Claire asked. The doctor looked uncomfortable. He said he'd be back later this afternoon. Of course, Derek was already moving on to the next phase. The phase where he left his grieving wife and started his new life. Claire lay back and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in this building, her daughter's body was being prepared for burial. Derek would have to make those decisions. Derek, who'd wanted this to happen. The thought made her want to vomit, but she did none of those things. She just lay there, holding his phone, reading the messages again, building a case, documenting every betrayal. Because somewhere beneath the grief and shock, a tiny voice whispered, "Remember this. You'll need it later." Claire didn't know yet what that meant. She only knew that everything she'd believed about her life had been a lie, and lies, eventually, always come into the light. Derek came back 3 hours later, showered and wearing fresh clothes that smelled of expensive detergent and his cologne, the one Claire had bought him for Christmas. He'd even stopped for coffee. She could smell it on him, that expensive dark roast from the artisanal place near his office in Midtown. The same place he'd apparently been taking Jessica, based on the Instagram posts Claire had found while continuing to scroll through his phone during his absence. "Hey," he said softly, easing himself onto the edge of her hospital bed like he was visiting someone with a contagious disease. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here when you woke up. I just needed to clear my head, process everything. You know how I get when things are intense?" Claire stared at him, really looked at him for the first time in months, maybe years. How had she never noticed how cold his eyes were, like chips of gray ice that never quite melted? Even when he smiled, how had she missed the way his expressions never quite reached those eyes, the way everything about him was calculated, performed, designed to get a specific reaction? "I found your phone, Osto," she said. Her voice came out flat, dead, emptied of all emotion. Derek's face didn't change, not even a flicker. Years of lying had made him good at this. "Oh, thanks. I was looking for that earlier. Must have left it when I went to get coffee." He reached for it casually, like it was just a phone and not evidence of his complete betrayal. "I read your messages. All of them." Now something shifted behind his eyes. Not panic, not even guilt, just calculation. She could practically see his brain working, running through scenarios, planning his response 3 moves ahead. He'd always been good at chess. "Claire," he reached for her hand with manufactured tenderness. She pulled away like he'd burned her. "Claire, let me explain. It's not what it looks like. You were hoping our baby would die. That's not, I never said that exactly. You're reading it wrong, taking things out of context. You're emotional right now, which is completely understandable given what you've been through. But get out." Derek stood up, and for a moment she thought he'd actually leave, thought he'd show at least that much respect. Instead, he walked to the door and closed it, locked it. The soft click of the lock echoed in the small room like a gunshot. "Listen to me, Hoham," he said, his voice taking on that reasonable, patient tone he used when he was about to gaslight her, the tone that made you doubt your own sanity, your own perception of reality. "You just lost a baby. You're grieving. Your hormones are everywhere. The anesthesia is still in your system. You're not thinking clearly. This isn't the time to make big decisions or accusations." "I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. Jessica means nothing." He dropped to his knees beside the bed in a move so theatrical it would have been funny if it wasn't so grotesque. "She's a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake that I already regret more than you could possibly know. I was weak. I was stupid. I was going through something and I handled it wrong. But it's over. Done. Finished. You said you loved her. I lied to her. I told her what she wanted to hear because I'm an idiot who got caught up in attention and excitement. But I don't love her. Not even close. I love you. Only you. You're my wife. You're the woman I married. You're the one who matters." He grabbed his phone and, right there in front of Claire, deleted Jessica's contact information. made a show of blocking the number. "See, gone. I'm blocking her number right now. I'm never speaking to her again. She doesn't exist to me anymore. Claire, please, don't let my mistake destroy us right when we need each other most." Claire wanted to believe him. That was the pathetic, humiliating truth. Even now, even after reading those messages, even after knowing he'd hoped for their baby's death, part of her desperately wanted this to be real, wanted to believe he actually felt remorse, that he could change, that their marriage could be saved. "How long?" she whispered. "It doesn't matter. What matters is how long, Derek." He looked away, a muscle jumping in his jaw. A year, maybe 14 months. I don't remember exactly when it started. It was gradual. The entire pregnancy, before the pregnancy. While Claire had been taking folic acid and reading parenting books and decorating the nursery at midnight because she was too excited to sleep, Derek had been building an entire secret life, creating a future that didn't include her. "But it's over now," Derek continued quickly, sensing her resolve weakening. "I'm recommitting to us, to our marriage, to building something better from this tragedy. Let's renew our vows. Let's start completely fresh. We can get through this together. We're stronger than this. We've been through worse. We've never been through worse than this. Then let me make it right. Give me that chance. Please, Claire. We just lost our daughter. Don't let my weakness cost us each other too. I need you. You need me. We need each other." Over the next 8 days, Derek performed the role of devoted, remorseful husband with Oscar-worthy skill. He brought her favorite foods Italian from that little place in Brooklyn they'd gone to on their first date, Thai from the restaurant near her school, pastries from the French bakery she loved. He held her while she cried, making soothing sounds and stroking her hair. He suggested they take time off work together, go somewhere peaceful to heal, maybe the mountains, maybe the beach, somewhere far from the city and all its painful memories. "You should definitely rest," he said gently one morning, bringing her coffee in bed. "The school will understand. Take the rest of the semester off, maybe even the summer. I'll take care of all the bills, all the logistics, everything. You just focus on healing, on processing, on getting back to yourself." He was so convincing that Claire almost forgot about the messages she'd read, almost let herself believe that this version of Derek was the real one and the other Derek, the one who'd laughed while their baby died, was an aberration. A moment of weakness, a mistake he'd never repeat. On day 8, Derek brought home a stack of papers. "Insurance stuff," he explained, setting them on the kitchen table next to her tea. "We need to update our policies after everything that happened. Standard procedure after a medical event like this. Just need your signature in a few places." Claire was so exhausted, so hollowed out by grief that never seemed to ease, that she barely read them. The words swam on the page. Medical beneficiary, asset transfer, joint liability release. It all sounded official and necessary and boring. Derek pointed to the signature lines with a pen, one after another. "Here, and here, the initial here, sign here, and one more on this page." She signed, page after page after palm. Her hand moved automatically, with muscle memory taking over where thought had shut down. "That's my girl," Derek murmured, kissing her forehead with what felt like genuine affection. "I'll take care of filing all of this. You just focus on healing, on us, on our future." After he left the room, phone call from work, he said Claire noticed his phone on the counter. Face up, unlocked, screen glowing with a new message. She shouldn't look. She'd promised herself she wouldn't keep torturing herself, but her hand moved anyway, picking up the phone, opening the message from an unknown number. "Phase 1 complete. She signed everything. Divorce papers ready for next week. And babe, I'm pregnant. 4 months. It's yours. We're finally going to have our family. I can't wait to be free of her and start our real life together." Claire's hands went numb. The papers she'd just signed weren't insurance documents. The tender reunion, the devoted husband act, the promises of renewal, all of it was performance. Manipulation, a con designed to get her to sign away her rights, her assets, her life. And Jessica wasn't gone. The blocked number was meaningless. He'd just gotten a new phone, or she had, or they were texting through some app. The affair had never ended. Worse, Jessica was pregnant. 4 months, which meant she'd gotten pregnant right around the time Claire had. Two women, both carrying Derek's children. Except Derek had chosen which baby mattered, which woman he actually wanted. While Claire mourned the daughter she'd lost, Jessica was carrying the child Derek actually wanted, the child of his future, the child that would cement his new life with his exciting mistress. Claire carefully set the phone back down exactly where Derek had left it. She walked to the bathroom, closed the door, turned on the shower to mask any sound, and finally allowed herself to completely break apart. The grief counselor's office was supposedly in a modern building in Midtown, all glass and chrome, and the kind of aggressive minimalism that was meant to look healing but just felt cold. Derek held Claire's hand in the elevator, rubbing her knuckles with his thumb in that way he knew she used to find comforting. Used to, back when his touch meant safety instead of betrayal. "This will really help," he said, his voice gentle and caring. "Talking to a professional about everything we've been through, processing the trauma together. Lots of couples find that shared grief counseling actually strengthens their marriage, gives them tools to move forward." Claire said nothing. She'd been saying nothing for 2 days, ever since she'd seen that text message about Jessica's pregnancy. She was gathering evidence now, methodically documenting everything, taking photos of messages when Derek showered, screenshotting bank statements when he left his laptop open, recording conversations on her phone when he didn't know. She didn't know what she'd do with it all yet. She just knew she needed proof, needed documentation, needed something concrete to hold on to when he inevitably tried to make her think she was crazy. The elevator opened on the 14th floor with a soft chime, but instead of a therapist's name etched on the frosted glass doors, she saw Marshall and Associates, family law attorneys. Claire's stomach dropped. "Derek, this isn't—" "Go inside, Claire." His voice had changed completely. The gentle husband act evaporated like morning fog. This was the Derek from the messages. Cold, efficient, done pretending. "We have a meeting." "I'm not going in there." His hand tightened on her elbow. Not enough to bruise, but enough to communicate you don't have a choice. "Yes, you are. We're finishing this today. I'm done dragging it out." Inside the conference room, a woman in a severe black suit waited behind a polished table. She didn't smile, didn't offer condolences, didn't acknowledge the emotional devastation radiating off Claire in waves. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm Margaret Foster. I represent your husband in these divorce proceedings. Please, have a seat." The room tilted sickeningly. Claire gripped the back of a chair to stay upright. "Divorce proceedings. There are no divorce proceedings. We're supposed to be at grief counseling. Derek filed the paperwork 2 days ago. We're here to finalize the preliminary agreement and discuss settlement terms." "I didn't agree to any divorce. I don't want a divorce." "Actually, you did agree." Margaret Foster slid a thick document across the table with manicured fingers. Claire's signature appeared at the bottom of page after page. "These papers you signed last week weren't insurance forms. They were financial disclosures, preliminary asset division agreements, and acknowledgement of irreconcilable differences. You waived your right to contest the filing." Claire looked at Derek, who was leaning against the wall checking his phone like this was just another boring meeting. "You tricked me. I was grieving. Medicated. Not in my right mind. No court would—" "You seemed perfectly competent when you signed." Derek interrupted, still not looking up from his phone. "My attorney has it all documented on video. Remember the camera on the bookshelf, the one pointing at the kitchen table where we do all our paperwork? It was recording the entire time. You look completely lucid. Sad, yes, but competent." He'd recorded her, planned this entire psychological operation, probably for months, maybe the whole pregnancy. The conference room door opened, and Claire's world shattered completely. Jessica walked in, glowing with that specific radiance of healthy pregnancy. She wore a designer maternity dress that emphasized her belly instead of hiding it, one of those expensive ones from the boutique in Soho that Claire had looked at but never bought because they seemed too extravagant. "Sorry I'm late," Jessica said brightly, like she was arriving at brunch instead of her best friend's ambush. Traffic was insane. Then she saw Claire, and her face arranged itself into an expression of exaggerated sympathy that looked rehearsed, practiced in a mirror. "Oh, Claire Bear, I'm so sorry you're hurting. I really am. But you have to understand, Derek and I are in love. Real, passionate, once-in-a-lifetime love. Not that comfortable roommate situation you two had. Claire stood up so fast her chair toppled backward with a crash. You were my best friend. Since freshman year of college, I held your hand when your dad died. You were my maid of honor. And you were always so naive. Jessica interrupted, one hand resting protectively on her belly. So trusting, so completely clueless about what was happening right in front of you. Derek chose our baby over your loss. That should tell you everything you need to know about who matters to him. The words were designed to destroy, crafted specifically to hit every vulnerable place. And they worked. Claire felt something inside her crack apart like ice under pressure. The beach house, Margaret Foster continued, as if discussing the emotional destruction of a human being was just another item on her agenda. The property you inherited from your mother in the Hamptons, Derek sold it last week to an LLC for $1. That corporation is owned by Miss Hartley. The transfer is legal and binding. He can't do that. It was mine. My mother left it to me. Just me. Was yours? Past tense. You signed the deed transfer yourself. Again, we have it on video. You seem to understand exactly what you were signing. Claire's mind raced back, trying to remember. Had there been a deed in those papers, she'd been so tired, so broken. The words had blurred together. She looked at Derek. Finally, he walked by. He met her eyes. His expression was blank, bored. Let's be adults about this, he said in that reasonable tone he used when he wanted to sound mature and rational. We're just different people now. We want different things. You'll move on. I'll move on. There's no reason to make this ugly or complicated. You killed our baby. The room went silent. Even Margaret Foster, clearly used to contentious divorces, looked uncomfortable. Jessica's performative sympathy cracked slightly. That's a very serious accusation, the attorney said carefully, her pen pausing over her notes. I have the messages. You and Jessica discussing how convenient it would be if something just happened naturally. You were glad when our daughter died. You hoped for it. I was emotionally overwrought, Derek interrupted smoothly, like he'd prepared this response. Probably had, with his attorney's help. Saying things I didn't mean in a moment of stress and confusion. You're twisting my words because you're hurt and looking for someone to blame. It's understandable, but it's also slander. It's the truth. Then prove it. Derek stood up, buttoning his expensive suit jacket. Oh, wait, you can't, because I deleted everything. Wiped my phone, factory reset, and Jessica's phone had an unfortunate accident. Fell in a pool. Tragic. No way to recover the data. He'd thought of everything, every possible angle, every piece of evidence. He'd systematically erased his crimes while playing the devoted husband. Sign the papers, Claire, Margaret Foster said, pushing them across the table. You get $15,000, a generous settlement, given the brevity of the marriage and lack of shared assets, plus your personal belongings and your vehicle. Mr. Ashford keeps the apartment, the investment accounts, and the shared property. You kept terrible financial records, so it's virtually impossible to prove what was yours versus what was marital property. I put $340,000 into our joint account last year, my inheritance money from my grandmother. Can't prove that either without documentation. No deposit slips, no transfer records, no paper trail. You always were careless with receipts and financial documentation. Margaret Foster slid the final divorce agreement across the table. You have 48 hours to sign. If you contest, Mr. Ashford will file for full forensic accounting, which will be expensive for you and ultimately pointless since he has documentation proving ownership of all disputed assets. He's being very generous with this offer. Mrs. Ashford, I'd advise you to take it. Generous. They'd stolen her entire life, her marriage, her money, her home, her mother's house, and they were calling it generous. Claire looked at Jessica, who was now scrolling through Instagram, already bored with the drama she'd helped create. She looked at Derek, who was texting someone, probably his mother or his boss, telling them how smoothly the meeting went. They'd already won. They both knew it. This meeting was just theater. Just clean up. just making it official. I need air, Claire whispered, the walls closing in. Of course, Margaret Foster said without sympathy. Take the 48 hours. Review everything with your own attorney if you'd like, though I should warn you that contesting will only result in additional legal fees you'll have to pay. Fighting this will only hurt you more financially and emotionally. Claire walked out of that office on legs that didn't feel like her own. She walked past the receptionist who wouldn't meet her eyes, past the other people waiting for their own meetings about their own shattered lives, into the elevator where her reflection in the polished doors showed someone she didn't recognize. She made it to the building's bathroom before the breakdown hit, locked herself in a stall, slid down the wall, and finally let herself completely shatter into pieces. The eviction notice was taped to her apartment door when Claire got home. She stood in the hallway staring at the document that said she had 72 hours to remove all belongings. The apartment had been sold to Derek, who had apparently owned it all along. According to some document she'd signed 2 years ago that she didn't remember signing, her belongings were already on the sidewalk in trash bags, black garbage bags like she was refuse. Neighbors walked past avoiding eye contact, suddenly very interested in their phones or the sky. They knew. Everyone knew. Jessica had made sure of that. Claire pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. Jessica's latest post showed her pregnant belly, Derek's hand on it, both of them laughing. The caption, "Finally free to love him publicly. New beginnings for our little family. Hashtag baby. Onboard. Hashtag twin blessings. Hash real love." 2 million likes. Thousands of comments about how perfect they were together. Claire scrolled further. Photos of her mother's beach house, our new weekend getaway. Pictures of Jessica wearing her mother's jewelry, using her mother's vintage dishes, taking everything sacred and making it content. Claire called her bank. Checking account $412, the savings account where she'd had nearly $60,000 emptied, transferred out 6 months ago, according to the system, by her, except she'd never made that transfer. She tried her credit card, declined, maxed out, $15,000 in charges she'd never made. Her car was gone too, repossession notice stuffed in one of the trash bags. Derek had stopped making payments 3 months ago, even though Claire had been giving him money for them. In 1 week, Derek had taken everything, the house, the money, the care, her job. Her school had put her on administrative leave after Derek's attorney sent them a letter claiming that Claire was having a mental health crisis and was potentially dangerous. Claire sat on the curb next to her trash-bagged life and called the only person she had left. "Aunt Margaret," she said when her mother's sister answered. "I need help." 40 minutes later, a black Mercedes pulled up. Margaret Vaughn stepped out, elegant in a charcoal coat despite the April heat. She looked at the trash bags, at Claire's tear-streaked face, at the eviction notice. "Get in the car," she said. No questions, no lectures, just get in the car. They drove in silence through Manhattan until Margaret pulled up in front of a tall residential building. The doorman nodded to Margaret like she was expected. The elevator went up and up. When it opened directly into a penthouse apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. Modern furniture, art on the walls, a telescope by the window. "This was your mother's," Margaret said quietly. "You never knew about it because she didn't want you growing up knowing about the money. She wanted you to be normal, happy, kind." "What money?" Claire whispered. Margaret pulled out a leather folder. Inside, documents with official seals, financial statements, property deeds, all bearing the name Vaughn Capital Holdings. "Your mother was a venture capitalist. She built a portfolio worth billions over 30 years. Apple in 1980, Amazon in 97, Google in 98. Margaret opened another folder. "Claire, you're worth $2.4 billion. You became a billionaire the day before you lost your baby." The room spun. Claire sat down hard. "That's not possible. It's documented, legal. Derek doesn't know. No one knows except me, the trustees, and now you. Why didn't she tell me?" "She wanted you to discover who you were without money influencing everything. She wanted you to learn empathy, resilience, kindness, and you did. You became a teacher. You married for love. You stayed humble. I married wrong." Margaret's expression hardened. You married a predator, but now you have resources he doesn't know about. And I have a friend who specializes in destroying men like Derek Ashford. She pulled out a business card, Troy Bennett, forensic accountant and attorney at law. Your ex-husband is sloppy, arrogant. He thinks he covered his tracks. But men like him always leave crumbs. And Troy Bennett eats crumbs for breakfast. Claire looked at the card, at the folder, at her aunt. I thought I had nothing left, she whispered. You never had nothing. You just forgot who your mother was. Margaret sat beside her. Your mother used to say money is like fire. In the right hands, it warms a home. In the wrong hands, it burns the world down. Derek Ashford is about to learn what happens when you steal from a Vaughn woman. For the first time in a week, Claire felt something other than grief. A small, cold ember of fury began to glow in her chest. What do we do first? She asked. Margaret smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. First, we make him think he won. Then we bury him so deep he'll never see daylight again. Troy Bennett's office was nothing like Derek's sleek corporate space with its glass walls and expensive coffee machine. It was cramped, paper stacked, and smelled like old coffee and the kind of obsessive work that happened at 3 in the morning when normal people were sleeping. Troy himself looked exactly like an accountant from a movie, thick glasses held together with tape, rumpled shirt that looked like it had been worn for 2 days straight, and the manic energy of someone who hadn't slept in 3 days but was too caffeinated to care. Claire Vaughn, he said, shaking her hand with surprising firmness for someone who looked like a strong breeze might knock him over. Your aunt told me about your situation. I've already started preliminary research. And let me tell you, your ex-husband is an idiot. A cocky, arrogant, sloppy idiot who thinks he's way smarter than he actually is. He seems pretty smart to me, Claire said bitterly, sinking into a chair across from his desk. He took everything I had in less than a week. He took everything you thought you had, Troy corrected, spreading documents across his desk with the enthusiasm of someone showing off a prize collection. Big difference. Let me show you who Derek Ashford really is. He pulled up a file on his computer, turned the screen so Claire could see. Derek Ashford, 35 years old, investment banker at Sterling and Stone, makes $300,000 a year base salary, which is decent but not wealthy by Manhattan standards. Yet he lives like he makes $3 million. The apartment he just stole from you, $8,000 a month. The car, $90,000. His watch collection, I estimate about $200,000. Jessica's lifestyle. Don't even get me started. How is that possible on his salary? Embezzlement. Troy tapped a spreadsheet filled with red highlighted numbers. He's been systematically stealing from client accounts for at least 3 years. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Nothing that triggers automatic audits, nothing that would make a bank's fraud detection system light up. But it adds up. I estimate he's taken approximately $4.7 million over 36 months. Claire's mouth fell open. From his own clients, people who trust him, pension funds mostly, Troy said, his expression grim. Retirees who don't check their statements carefully because the numbers are complicated and they trust their financial advisor. Elderly people who don't understand digital banking. He specifically targeted vulnerable populations who wouldn't notice or wouldn't know how to fight back. Can you prove this? Already have. Troy pulled out another thick folder. Your aunt gave me access to Vaughn Capital's forensic team. We've got some of the best financial investigators in the country. We've been tracking Derek's digital fingerprints for 72 hours straight. Every transaction, every transfer, every lie. It's all documented. He spread out printed bank statements, wire transfer records, fake invoices. And here's where it gets interesting. Jessica Hartley's influencer career, completely fake. Those brand deals she's always posting about Derek pays companies to pretend they hired her. He's essentially laundering his stolen money through her Instagram account. Claire leaned forward, studying the documents. I don't understand. Why would he do that? Tax evasion and money laundering. Troy pulled up Jessica's Instagram on his computer. Look at this post. She claims a handbag company paid her $50,000 for an endorsement. But actually, Derek paid the company $50,000 to pretend they paid her. The company takes a cut, usually 20%, and sends the rest back to Jessica. The money cycles through, looking legitimate. Jessica reports it as business income, pays taxes on it, and suddenly dirty money is clean. That's insane. That's fraud. Multiple kinds, wire fraud, tax fraud, money laundering. And here's the beautiful part. Troy grinning like he just won the lottery. Jessica has no idea. She genuinely thinks she's famous. She thinks brands really want her. She spends hours staging photos and writing captions, completely clueless that she's participating in federal crimes. She's what we call an unwitting accomplice. Claire thought about Jessica's Instagram, those carefully curated photos, the constant humble bragging about partnerships and deals, all fake, all bought with stolen money, all performance. "What about the baby?" Claire asked quietly, her voice nearly breaking. "My baby." "Is there anything suspicious there?" Troy's expression softened, the manic energy dimming for a moment. "I'm sorry, I looked into the hospital records very carefully. Your miscarriage was natural, medically speaking, placental abruption. It happens sometimes with no clear cause. There's nothing suspicious in the medical files." Claire felt relief and disappointment simultaneously. She wanted Derek to be guilty, but she didn't want her daughter's death to be murder. "But there is something else," Troy continued carefully. "Something that borders on attempted murder, though it would be almost impossible to prove criminal intent." He pulled out printed documents. "These are Derek's insurance records. 3 days before your emergency, he increased your life insurance policy from $500,000 to $2 million. Made himself the sole beneficiary." The air left Claire's lungs. "Why would he? And while you were unconscious in surgery, he signed a do not resuscitate order. It's right here in your hospital chart." Troy showed her a copy, Derek's signature, bold and clear, next to the box that said, "Do not attempt resuscitation." "He tried to kill me. The doctors overrode it. Dr. Pierce specifically. She saw it in your chart, knew you'd never discussed end-of-life wishes, you were only 31 and healthy, and she ignored it. Hospital policy actually requires spousal consent to be witnessed by medical staff for it to be valid. She may have saved your life." Claire couldn't breathe. Derek hadn't just wanted the baby gone. He'd wanted her gone too. Had actively signed papers that would have let her die, so he could collect $2 million and start his new life debt-free with Jessica. "We can't prove attempted murder," Troy said gently. "The insurance increase could be explained away as good financial planning. The DNR could be painted as a panicked husband making a bad decision under stress. But we can prove embezzlement, money laundering, insurance fraud, wire fraud, and about 15 other felonies. Federal prosecutors would absolutely love this case. How long will it take to build?" "It's already built." Troy gestured at the mountains of documents. "We've got bank records, wire transfers, fake invoices, email trails, text messages from his cloud backup he forgot about. The question isn't whether we can build a case. The question is, what do you want? Criminal charges, civil suit, both maximum media exposure or quiet justice?" Claire looked at all the evidence spread across Troy's desk. Physical proof of every lie, every theft, every betrayal. For the first time since she'd woken up in that hospital room, she felt something like power. "I want him to pay for what he took from me," she said quietly. "Not just the money, everything. His reputation, his freedom, his future. I want him to lose everything he values." Troy nodded approvingly. "Then we'll need to be strategic. Right now, Derek thinks you're helpless, broken, destroyed. That's our advantage. We let him keep thinking that while we prepare the perfect trap. Let him celebrate. Let him feel safe. And then we spring it all at once. What kind of trap?" Troy pulled out a timeline, color-coded and detailed. "The kind where he doesn't just lose his freedom or his money, he loses his reputation, his career, his social standing, his relationship, and every illusion he's built. Everything he values gets systematically destroyed. And the beauty is, we're not even doing it. We're just revealing what's already there. The truth is the weapon." For the next 2 hours, they mapped out Claire's revenge. Not hot and impulsive, but cold and calculated. Every move planned 3 steps ahead. Every contingency accounted for. Every angle covered. They would let Derek finalize the divorce. Let him think he'd won completely. Meanwhile, Troy would prepare federal charges with prosecutors he'd already contacted. Vaughn Capital would use its leverage to pressure Sterling and Stone to cooperate with investigations. The firm is going to want to distance themselves from Derek as fast as possible once they see this evidence, Troy explained. They'll throw him under the bus to save their reputation. That's how these white-collar cases work. The institution protects itself. By the time Claire left Troy's office, her head was spinning with legal terms and timelines and strategic moves. But she wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't broken. She was dangerous. Claire signed the divorce papers in a small coffee shop in the East Village, surrounded by witnesses who'd been carefully selected by Margaret Foster. She wore her oldest clothes, a sweater with a small stain, jeans that were slightly too big because she'd lost weight from stress. No makeup. Her hair was unwashed, pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked broken, defeated. Exactly what Derek needed to see. Margaret Foster watched her sign each page with visible satisfaction, her expensive pen clicking as she made check marks next to each signature. You made the right choice, Mrs. Ashford. Contesting would have been expensive and ultimately fruitless. This way, everyone can move on with their lives. I just want it to be over, Claire whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. She'd practiced this in Margaret Vaughn's bathroom mirror, the defeated tone, the broken delivery. I can't fight anymore. I don't have the energy or the resources. Very mature of you, Margaret Foster said without warmth. You'll receive your $15,000 via bank transfer within 30 business days. Mr. Ashford wishes you well in your future endeavors. Derek wasn't even there, too busy to watch his ex-wife surrender. Probably at work, or with Jessica, or planning their future. Too important to waste time on the woman he'd destroyed. Claire took her copy of the signed documents, thanked the witnesses politely, and left the coffee shop. She walked 6 blocks to a private courier service that cost $200, but guaranteed same-day delivery with signature confirmation. She shipped the documents to Troy Bennett with a note written in steady handwriting. It's done. He thinks he won. Start phase 2. Then she went back to her aunt's penthouse, her penthouse now, technically, since it was part of her inheritance and changed into clothes that actually fit her new reality. Designer jeans that had been tailored to her measurements, a cashmere sweater that cost more than she used to much in a week of teaching, shoes that were so comfortable they felt like wearing nothing. How do you feel? Margaret asked, watching Claire transform from defeated ex-wife to billionaire heiress. Like I'm wearing a costume, Claire admitted, looking at herself in the mirror. She didn't recognize this person. This woman with expensive clothes and perfect hair and cold eyes. You'll get used to it. Margaret handed her a glass of wine. Now, phase 2 begins officially. Troy will file the SEC complaint tomorrow morning. The Securities and Exchange Commission will start investigating Sterling and Stone within a week. Derek will be arrested within 2 weeks, maybe 3 at most. The wheels of justice move slowly, but they're moving. What do I do until then? Whatever you want. You're a billionaire. Claire, the world is literally your playground now. But Claire didn't want to play. She wanted justice. She wanted revenge. She wanted Derek to feel even a fraction of what he'd made her feel. She spent the next week essentially living in Troy's cramped office, learning the intricate details of every crime Derek had committed. She memorized account numbers, transaction dates, shell company names. She wanted to understand exactly how he'd systematically destroyed her life while stealing from vulnerable elderly people. Meanwhile, Derek and Jessica's life continued its public spectacle. They posted daily Instagram updates showing their perfect relationship, pregnancy cravings documented with professional food photography, nursery planning with before and after shots, couples yoga classes captured with ring lights and multiple angles. Each post got millions of views, thousands of comments, endless validation. She's due in 6 weeks, Claire noted one evening, watching Jessica's latest ultrasound video. The twins were clearly visible, moving and healthy. Everything Claire's daughter would never be. Twins, Margaret added, reading over her shoulder. She announced it last week with some elaborate gender reveal video. Pink and blue smoke. Very Instagram. I wasn't invited to the engagement party. No, but you're going anyway. Claire looked at her aunt. Why would I do that? Why would I torture myself? Because we need Derek comfortable. confident, complacent. We need him to think you've completely accepted defeat. Show up, congratulate them graciously, be the bigger person. Let everyone see you're moving on. Then, when we strike, the contrast will be devastating. Claire didn't want to go. The thought of facing them, smiling at them, pretending everything was fine, made her physically ill. But Margaret was right. The performance mattered. The long game required short-term humiliation. The engagement party was at an expensive rooftop bar in Soho, the kind of place that charged $30 for a cocktail and had a dress code posted on the door. String lights created a romantic ambiance. Craft cocktails with elaborate garnishes. Influencers everywhere taking photos with professional cameras, getting the perfect shot for their feeds. Jessica glowed in a white silk maternity dress, her belly prominently displayed like a trophy. Derek wore a suit that cost at least $3,000 paid for with someone's retirement fund. They stood at the center of everything, accepting congratulations like royalty. Claire arrived late, deliberately. She wore thrift store clothes she'd bought specifically for this performance, an ill-fitting dress, cheap shoes, a cardigan with a pulled thread. She'd left her hair messy, wore no jewelry. She looked like exactly what Derek wanted everyone to think: she was a pathetic ex-wife who couldn't move on. Jessica saw her first. Her expression flickered between surprise and delight, the kind of joy predators feel when their prey walks willingly into the trap. She whispered something to Derek, who turned and smirked. That cold, cruel expression he thought no one else saw. They let her approach, made her walk all the way across the rooftop while conversation died and everyone stared. "Congratulations," Claire said softly when she reached them. She held out a small Tiffany blue box. "I wanted to return this. It belongs to your future, not my past." Inside was her wedding ring, the one Derek had proposed with on that California beach 6 years ago. Before she knew what he was, Jessica took it like it was a curiosity from a museum, something historical and quaint. "Oh, honeys, thank you so much. That's very mature of you, very healthy. I'm proud of you for getting to this place. I hope you're happy," Claire continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Both of you, you deserve each other." She'd meant it as an insult: you both deserve the worst, but they took it as a compliment, because narcissists always hear what they want to hear. "We are happy," Derek said, putting his arm around Jessica possessively. "Happier than I've ever been. No hard feelings. Claire, you'll find someone eventually, maybe someone more your speed. A teacher or librarian or something, someone quiet. You were always better at quiet." The guests nearby were filming on their phones. Claire could see the videos forming already in her mind. Sad ex-wife crashes engagement party, gets humiliated. It would be perfect. Exactly what they needed. "Well, enjoy your night," Claire said. Then she turned and walked away slowly. Shoulders slumped, head down, the picture of defeat. Behind her, she heard Jessica's laugh, sharp and delighted. "Oh my God, that was so awkward. She's so pathetic. Did you see her dress? Was that from Goodwill?" More laughter, more videos, more performance. Claire got into Margaret's Mercedes and immediately straightened up. The defeated posture disappeared. Her expression hardened. The performance was over. "How was it?" Margaret asked, pulling away from the curb. "Perfect. They think I'm completely destroyed, broken beyond repair." Derek looked at me like I was already a ghost. "Good, because tomorrow morning, Troy files the SEC complaint, and the day after that, federal investigators will be going through Sterling and Stone's records with microscopes. The walls start closing in." Claire looked back at the rooftop, where Derek and Jessica were toasting their future with champagne that probably cost $200 a bottle. Stolen money celebrating stolen love. "Do it," she said. "Burn it all down." The SEC audit notification arrived at Sterling and Stone's corporate office on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:32 a.m. Claire knew this because Troy had connections everywhere: former colleagues, law school friends, people who owed him favors. He texted her updates in real time like he was live tweeting a sports event. "Troy, notification just hit. Senior partners are being called into emergency meeting." Troy, "Derek just got summoned. Saw him through the window. His face went white, like printer, paper white." Troy, "They're asking about shell companies and irregular client transactions. He's claiming total ignorance. They're not buying it. Body language is all wrong. By noon, federal agents in their distinctive windbreakers were in the building, carrying boxes of equipment for confiscating computers and files. By 3 p.m., Derek's personal accounts had been frozen by federal order. By 5 p.m., his office was sealed with yellow tape that said federal evidence do not cross. Claire watched it all happen from a coffee shop across the street, sitting by the window with a latte she didn't drink and a magazine she didn't read. Through the glass walls of Sterling and Stone's building, she could see Derek being escorted out by 2 agents. Not arrested yet, not in handcuffs, but close. So close. He looked confused, angry, like someone had fundamentally changed the rules of a game he'd been winning his entire life. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair messy, his usual confidence completely shattered. Jessica was home when different agents arrived at the apartment Derek had stolen from Claire. Claire knew this because Jessica documented everything on Instagram, still thinking this was all some kind of mistake that would make for good content later. Jessica's Instagram story posted at 3:47 p.m. OMG, federal agents literally at our door right now. This is insane, Derek says. It's just routine audit stuff. Something about client records. So stressful when you're 8 months pregnant with twins. Send prayers and positive vibes. Your pregnancy drama. Federal mistake. Sorry, staying strong. The comments poured in immediately. Thousands of them. Stay strong, Esther Mama. The universe protects good people. Praying for you and your babies. This must be so scary. Must be a jealous ex or something trying to cause trouble. You two are hashtag couple goals. Don't let the haters win. If only they knew. Troy called that evening, his voice crackling with barely contained excitement. They arrested him. 4:17 p.m. Embezzlement, wire fraud, money laundering, and about 12 other charges I can't even remember. Bail hearing is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Will he make bail? Probably by him. His parents have money, old Connecticut family. Trust funds. They'll post bail to avoid the embarrassment. But the damage is done. Sterling and Stone fired him effective immediately. His name is all over the news. The Wall Street Journal already has a story queued up for tomorrow's print edition. And Claire, we're just getting started. The next morning, Claire dressed with deliberate care, a black suit that screamed seriousness and power, hair pulled back severely, minimal jewelry. She looked like what she was, someone with resources, someone who couldn't be dismissed. She sat in the back of the courtroom during Derek's bail hearing, watching him fidget at the defense table. He wore the same suit from yesterday, wrinkled now. He hadn't gone home, probably spent the night in holding. His $500 haircut was ruined. His expensive watch had been confiscated as potential evidence. He didn't notice her at first. Too busy arguing with his court-appointed attorney, his own lawyer had dropped him within hours of the arrest. Too toxic, too public, too career-destroying to be associated with. When the prosecutor stood up to read the charges, Derek's face went from pale to gray. The prosecutor was a woman in her 40s named Elizabeth Warren, no relation to the senator, and she had a reputation for destroying white-collar criminals. Your Honor, Elizabeth Warren began, the defendant Derek Ashford stands accused of systematically embezzling $4.7 million from vulnerable clients over a 36-month period, 36 counts of wire fraud, 22 counts of money laundering, racketeering, insurance fraud, and potentially conspiracy to commit murder. Though we're still investigating that particular charge, the courtroom gasped. Jessica, sitting in the front row with her pregnant belly and designer sunglasses, made a small wounded sound. The evidence is overwhelming, the prosecutor continued. Mr. Ashford used his position of trust to steal from retirees, elderly clients who trusted him with their life savings. He then laundered the stolen money through fake business arrangements with his fiance's social media accounts, creating an elaborate scheme to evade taxes and hide assets. She pulled out exhibits, holding them up for the judge, bank statements, wire transfers, text messages. Additionally, Your Honor, we have troubling evidence that 3 days before his then-wife had a medical emergency resulting in pregnancy loss, Mr. Ashford increased her life insurance policy to $2 million. He then signed an unauthorized do not resuscitate order while she was unconscious in surgery. The courtroom erupted, people shouting, reporters typing frantically on phones. Judge Patricia Winters slamming her gavel repeatedly. While we cannot currently prove attempted murder, Elizabeth Warren said once order was restored. This speaks to the defendant's character. He views human beings as assets to be liquidated when they're no longer useful. Derek's attorney tried to object, tried to argue, but the damage was catastrophic. The judge's expression had gone from neutral to disgusted. Bail was set at $1 million, cash only, no 10% option, full amount. Derek finally turned around, scanning the courtroom like a trapped animal looking for escape. His eyes landed on Claire. She smiled at him. Not a warm smile, not a triumphant smile, just a small, cold smile that said, I did this. I'm the one who destroyed you, and we're not even close to finished. His face went from gray to white, total comprehension crashing over him like a wave. After the hearing, Jessica confronted Claire in the courthouse hallway. Her pregnant belly preceded her like a battering ram. Her sunglasses were pushed up into her hair. Her face was blotchy from crying. You did this, Jessica screamed, not caring that lawyers and defendants and families were all watching. You planted evidence. You're trying to destroy him because you're jealous. I didn't do anything, Claire said calmly, her voice steady. The evidence did. Derek destroyed himself. I just made sure people could see what was already there. Those charges are fake. Someone planted that evidence. He would never steal from clients. Jessica, did you really think all those brand deals were real? Claire asked quietly. Did you never wonder why companies were paying you $50,000 for a single Instagram post when you had fewer followers than actual celebrities? Jessica's expression flickered, doubt creeping in around the edges of her denial. Derek was using you to launder stolen money. Every sponsorship was fraud. Every brand partnership was a crime. And now you're implicated too. You're an accessory to money laundering whether you knew it or not. I didn't know. Jessica's voice went up an octave. I thought I was actually successful. I thought, willful ignorance isn't a legal defense. Claire interrupted. But here's what I'll do. And I'm only offering this once. I'll testify that you were manipulated, that you genuinely believed the deals were real, that Derek used you. In exchange, you testify against him. Tell prosecutors everything about the beach house, the fake businesses, the life insurance policy, all of it. Why would you help me? I slept with your husband. I destroyed your marriage. You didn't destroy my marriage. Derek did that himself years ago. You were just the most recent woman he used. Claire stepped closer. I'm not helping you. I'm making sure Derek pays for what he did to me, to our baby, to every person he hurt. If destroying him means giving you a second chance, fine. But if you protect him, you'll go to prison too. Pregnant with twins. Is he worth that? She handed Jessica a business card with Troy Bennett's information printed in clean, professional letters. Call him or don't. Either way, Derek's going to federal prison for a very long time. But if you cooperate, maybe you won't be changing your twins' diapers through prison phone calls. Jessica stared at the card, tears streaming down her face, mascara running in black rivers. Her perfect Instagram life was collapsing in real time. The performance was over. I loved him, she whispered. And for the first time, she sounded human, real, not like an influencer playing in a role. So did I, Claire said, and her voice was gentle. That's how he gets you. He makes you believe you're special, that you're different from everyone else, that he'll be loyal to you even though he wasn't loyal to others. But Jessica, you were never special to him. You were just useful. And now you're not. She walked away before Jessica could respond, leaving her standing in the courthouse hallway holding a business card that represented her only chance at avoiding prison. Behind her, she heard Jessica start to cry. Really cry. Not pretty Instagram tears, but ugly, broken pause. Claire didn't look back. 6 months later, Derek's criminal trial began in federal court in Manhattan. In those 6 months, everything in his carefully constructed life had systematically fallen apart like a building demolition in slow motion. Sterling and Stone had not only fired him, but sued him for damages, reputational harm, and breach of fiduciary duty. The lawsuit sought $20 million. His parents had indeed posted his bail, but they'd also publicly disowned him in a statement released through their attorney. The Greenwich social circles they belonged to had closed ranks against him. Jessica had indeed cooperated with prosecutors, providing text messages, financial records, detailed testimony about Derek's habits and statements. In exchange, she'd been granted full immunity from all charges. She'd also left him, moving back in with her mother, facing the reality that her entire adult life had been a performance funded by stolen money. And most devastating of all, Jessica's twins weren't Derek's. The court-ordered DNA test, requested by Derek himself in a desperate attempt to establish some kind of sympathetic narrative, had revealed that the baby's biological father was Richard Sullivan, Derek's former boss at Sterling and Stone. Jessica had been sleeping with Richard for career advancement, sleeping with Derek for Instagram content, playing both men like instruments. When that news broke, Richard's wife had filed for divorce. He'd been fired from Sterling and Stone in disgrace. His reputation, built over 30 years, was destroyed in approximately 72 hours. Now Derek sat alone at the defense table, abandoned by everyone. Even his attorney looked like he'd rather be representing anyone else. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight in jail. His hair was graying at the temples. He looked 10 years older than he had 6 months ago. Claire took the witness stand on day 3 of the trial. She'd been dreading this moment and simultaneously craving it. The chance to tell her truth in a place where it would matter, where it would be documented, where Derek couldn't talk over her or gaslight her or make her question her own reality. Mrs. Ashford, the prosecutor Elizabeth Warren began gently, "Can you describe what happened the night you lost your baby?" Claire took a breath, gathering her thoughts. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the court reporter's fingers were still, waiting. "I was 7 months pregnant," she began, her voice steady. "I started hemorrhaging around 2 in the morning. My husband Derek drove me to St. Mary's Hospital. While I was in pre-op, bleeding heavily and terrified that I was losing my daughter, he stepped into the hallway to take a phone call." "From whom?" "His mistress, Jessica Hartley, my best friend since college." The jury leaned forward collectively. Several took notes. "I heard him tell her he loved her, that he'd leave me soon, that it was almost over. While our baby was literally dying 10 feet away, while machines were beeping emergency alarms, he was planning his future with her." "What happened after the surgery?" "I woke up alone. The baby was gone. Derek had left to go home and shower. He left his phone behind. I read messages between him and Jessica discussing how convenient it would be if something just happened to my pregnancy. They were hoping for exactly this outcome, hoping my daughter would die." Several jurors looked disgusted. One woman in the back row was crying silently. "Did you later discover other concerning information?" "Yes. I learned that 3 days before my medical emergency, Derek had increased my life insurance policy from $500,000 to $2 million without telling me. He made himself the sole beneficiary. Then, while I was unconscious in surgery, he signed a do not resuscitate order, a DNR. Yes, if my heart had stopped during complications, the medical staff would have been legally obligated to let me die. Except Dr. Pierce saw that it was fraudulent. I'd never discussed end-of-life wishes with Derek. I was young and healthy, and she overrode it. She may have saved my life." Derek's attorney objected on procedural grounds, but it was too late. The jury had heard it. The damage was done. They were looking at Derek like he was a monster. On cross-examination, Derek's attorney tried desperately to discredit Claire. "Isn't it true you're actually a billionaire, Mrs. Ashford? That you hid significant wealth from my client during your marriage?" "I didn't know about the wealth until after the divorce was finalized. My mother structured her estate in a trust that matured on my 32nd birthday. That happened to be the same week I lost my daughter. I had no knowledge of any inheritance prior to that." "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? If you're implying I somehow caused my own miscarriage to frame your client, that's both medically impossible and deeply offensive. No woman would kill her own wanted baby for revenge." The attorney backed off quickly, realizing he'd crossed a line. Troy Bennett testified next, walking the jury through every fraudulent transaction with the methodical precision of someone who lived for this kind of detail. He made complex financial crimes sound simple, clear, undeniable. "Mr. Ashford created 17 shell companies," Troy explained, using a PowerPoint presentation that made everything visual. "He would transfer money from client accounts into these fake businesses. The businesses would then pay Jessica Hartley for influencer services. She would report it as income and pay taxes. The money looked clean, but it was all stolen from retirees who trusted Mr. Ashford with their life savings. By the time Troy was finished testifying, even the defense attorney looked convinced of Derek's guilt. Jessica testified on day 5. She was noticeably not pregnant anymore. She'd given birth to the twins 2 months earlier. They were being raised by her mother while Jessica tried to rebuild some kind of life from the ruins. "Ms. Hartley," Elizabeth Warren asked, "how long were you romantically involved with the defendant?" 2 years, maybe closer to 2.5. During his marriage to Claire Vaughn. Yes, Jessica's voice was barely audible. Did you know the defendant was embezzling money? No, I thought I was genuinely successful. I thought brands actually wanted to work with me. Her voice cracked with emotion. He made me believe I was special, talented, that I'd built something real. Did the defendant ever discuss Mrs. Ashford's pregnancy with you? Jessica looked down at her hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. He said it was a mistake, that he wished it would just go away, that it was complicating his plans. After Mrs. Ashford lost her baby, what did the defendant say? He said it was better this way, that we could start fresh without complications or connections to his old life, that we could build something clean. Jessica was crying now. I didn't realize then how awful that was. I was so caught up in the fantasy of our relationship. The courtroom was absolutely silent except for Jessica's quiet crying. On the final day of testimony, Derek took the stand against his attorney's explicit advice. He was arrogant, defensive, absolutely convinced he could talk his way out of this just like he'd talked his way through everything else in his life. Mr. Ashford, did you embezzle $4.7 million from your clients at Sterling & Stone? I temporarily borrowed funds with every intention of repayment. The market was volatile. I needed liquidity. It's a common practice in high finance. Over 3 years, systematically stealing from elderly retirees. Stealing is a strong word. I prefer unauthorized short-term loans. Elizabeth Warren let that sit in the air for a moment. Let the jury absorb his complete lack of remorse. Did you increase your wife's life insurance policy 3 days before her medical emergency? Derek hesitated. That was standard financial planning for a growing family. Did you sign a DNR order while she was unconscious? I was told she might not survive the surgery. I thought I was sparing her from a prolonged vegetative state. It was mercy. Mercy that would net you $2 million. That's a mischaracterization. Did you love your wife, Mr. Ashford? Derek looked directly at Claire for the first time during the entire trial. I did once, in the beginning. When did you stop loving her? When I met Jessica, she was exciting, passionate, alive. Claire was boring, predictable. She wanted a small life teaching, babies, domestic routine. I wanted more. The prosecutor smiled coldly. So boring that you stole her inheritance money, forged her signature on legal documents, sold her mother's house for $1, and tried to let her die. I didn't try to kill her. You just didn't care if she lived or died. As long as you got the insurance money and your freedom. Elizabeth Warren turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, Derek Ashford is a predator in an expensive suit. He targets vulnerable women, steals everything they have, their money, their trust, their futures, and discards them when they're no longer useful. The only reason Claire Vaughn survived is because a doctor ignored his fraudulent DNR. The only reason we're here today is because Ms. Vaughn had resources he didn't know about. How many other victims weren't so lucky? How many other women did he destroy who didn't have billions to fight back with? The trial lasted 12 days total. The jury deliberated for exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. Guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Derek's face crumpled. He tried to look at Claire, perhaps seeking some last shred of sympathy or connection, but she'd already turned away. She was done watching him. Derek's sentencing hearing was scheduled for 3 months after the verdict, giving the judge time to review extensive pre-sentencing reports, victim impact statements, and psychological evaluations. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, standing room only, with victims whose lives Derek had destroyed, colleagues whose careers he'd damaged, reporters covering every angle of the case, and curious members of the public who'd followed the trial on the news. Judge Patricia Winters had the case file open in front of her, easily 300 pages thick. She'd clearly read every word. Her expression was grave as Derek was brought in, now wearing a prison jumpsuit instead of his expensive suits. The transformation was startling. He looked hollowed out, broken, nothing like the confident man who'd tricked Claire into signing divorce papers. Mr. Ashford, Judge Winters began, her voice cutting through the courtroom chatter. I've presided over hundreds of criminal cases in my 26 years on the federal bench. Yours is unique in its calculated cruelty. You didn't commit crimes of passion or desperation. You systematically destroyed lives over years for personal luxury and convenience. Derek stood on shaking legs. Your Honor, I've made mistakes, serious mistakes, but I'm not the monster they're painting me to be. I'm a person who made terrible choices under pressure. You're exactly that monster, Judge Winters interrupted sharply. Let me be specific. You embezzled $4.7 million from elderly retirees who trusted you with their life savings. You defrauded your employer, betraying professional ethics and legal obligations. You manipulated a young woman into becoming your unwitting accomplice in money laundering. You forged your wife's signature on legal documents. You stole her inheritance. You sold her deceased mother's property for $1. She paused, looking at Derek with undisguised contempt. And most disturbing of all, you signed a do not resuscitate order for your wife while she was fighting for her life during a medical emergency, hoping to collect $2 million in insurance money. Only the intervention of an alert physician prevented what could have been murder. I wasn't thinking clearly, Derek protested. I was under emotional stress. You were thinking extremely clearly. That's what makes your crime so chilling. Every action was calculated, planned, documented. You thought you were smarter than everyone else, that you could manipulate and deceive without consequences. Judge Winters closed the file with a sharp sound. You were wrong. She looked at her notes. I've read statements from 37 victims, retirees who now can't afford their medications because you stole their pension funds, a woman who lost her home because her savings disappeared into your fake companies, an 82-year-old man who's back working part-time at a grocery store because you stole his retirement. These are real people whose real lives you destroyed for Italian suits and luxury watches. Derek's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client has expressed remorse. Your client has expressed regret that he got caught. There's a difference. Judge Winters looked at Derek directly. Derek Ashford, you are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison on embezzlement charges, an additional 3 years consecutive for wire fraud, 2 years consecutive for money laundering. That's 20 years total in federal custody. Derek's legs buckled. His attorney caught him, barely keeping him upright. Additionally, you are ordered to pay $8.4 million in restitution to your victims and declare Vaughn the difference between what you stole and the damages you caused. You are permanently banned from the securities industry. You will never work in finance again. The judge paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter but somehow more powerful. And Mr. Ashford, I hope you spend every single day of those 20 years thinking about the child you were willing to let die for insurance money. I hope you think about the woman who trusted you with her heart, her home, and her future. I hope you think about the elderly victims whose golden years you stole, because you will have nothing but time to think. They took him away in handcuffs, guards on each side. He tried to look back at Claire one last time, his face desperate, but she'd already turned toward the exit. She had nothing left to say to him. No final words. No closure speech. He simply didn't matter anymore. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine felt almost aggressive after the fluorescent lighting inside. Reporters swarmed immediately, microphones thrust forward, cameras rolling. Claire had prepared a statement with Troy's help. Justice was served today, she read from a note card, her voice steady. Not just for me, but for every person Derek Ashford hurt. I hope this case reminds people that abuse isn't always physical. Sometimes it's financial. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's bureaucratic manipulation. But it's always devastating. And it's never the victim's fault. Someone from the back shouted a question about Jessica. Jessica Hartley was a victim too, Claire said carefully, the words she and Troy had practiced. She made poor choices, but Derek systematically manipulated her. I hope she uses this experience to build a better life for herself and her children. The truth was more complicated than that polished statement suggested. Jessica had indeed given birth to Richard Sullivan's twins, a boy and a girl, 2 months earlier. Richard wanted nothing to do with them, refusing even to pay child support without a court order. Jessica was living with her mother, Linda, in a small apartment in Queens, working as a waitress at a diner, struggling with every single aspect of single motherhood. Claire had anonymously paid off Linda Hartley's medical debts 3 weeks ago, $50,000 in cancer treatment bills, gone overnight. She'd never tell Jessica. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even compassion, really. It was just closure, cutting the last thread connecting her to that chapter of her life. That night, Claire stood in her penthouse overlooking Manhattan, the same view Derek had once coveted when he thought marrying her would give him access to a better life, the same city he'd tried to conquer through lies and theft and manipulation. Margaret joined her at the window with 2 glasses of expensive wine, the kind that cost more than Claire used to make in a month of teaching. "How do you feel?" Margaret asked quietly. "Empty," Claire admitted. "I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, powerful. But I just feel tired, like I've been running a marathon and finally crossed the finish line only to realize I'm exhausted and the prize is just getting to stop running. Revenge doesn't feel the way they tell you it will in movies." "No, atier," Claire sipped the wine. "But justice feels right. Not satisfying exactly. Not cathartic. Just right, balanced, fair." Her phone buzzed with a text from Troy Bennett. Civil suits settled out of court. Derek's parents paid full restitution plus damages to avoid further litigation and protect the family name. $8.4 million will be deposited in your account tomorrow morning. Claire read the message twice. She didn't need the money, she was worth billions, but the victims did. She'd already decided to create a foundation specifically for this financial literacy and emergency support for women escaping economic abuse. The entire settlement would be the seed funding. "What's next for you?" Margaret asked, watching the city lights flicker like 1,000 earthbound stars. Claire thought about it, really thought about it. For months, her entire existence had been consumed by Derek, destroying him, proving he couldn't break her, seeking justice. But what came after justice? Who was she when she wasn't fighting? "I'm going to teach again," she said finally. "Not because I need the money or because I have to, because I miss it. I miss helping kids discover that they're capable of more than they thought. I miss seeing their faces when they finally understand something difficult. Your mother would love that. I'm also going to date again, carefully, with better judgment, maybe travel, learn who I am now, after everything." Claire turned to face her aunt. "I'm going to build something good from all this pain, something that actually helps people, instead of just destroying the person who hurt me." Margaret raised her glass. "To new beginnings, then." "To surviving," Claire corrected, clinking glasses. "To learning that surviving isn't the same as living, and finally being ready to do both." They drank to that, and the wine tasted like hope. The gallery opening in Chelsea was packed with people holding wine glasses and speaking in hushed tones. Claire's paintings covered the white walls, bold, abstract, emotionally raw. The series was titled After the Ashes, documenting her journey from devastation to peace. The New York Times had called them unflinchingly honest. One piece had sold for $250,000 to a collector in Los Angeles. Claire wore a simple black dress, her hair longer now, naturally graying at the temples. She'd stopped hiding. She looked softer but somehow stronger, the strength that comes from surviving what you thought would destroy you. Victor Cole found her by the refreshments. "These are extraordinary," he said, gesturing at the paintings. "Your mother had that same ability, transmuting pain into something beautiful. I wasn't sure I'd ever paint again. Trauma either destroys creativity or supercharges it." He paused. "I wanted to ask you something. The foundation your mother and I were building, venture capital for women-led businesses, I'd like to restart it, with you as co-director." Claire was surprised. "I don't have her experience. You have her values, her ability to see potential in unexpected places." Victor smiled. "Think about it. No pressure." Later, as guests filtered out, Claire stood alone before her largest painting, a phoenix, abstract, all fire and movement, in pain, transforming into flight. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Claire, it's Jessica. I finished rehab. 90 days sober. working on being a better mom. I'll never forgive myself for what I did, but I'm trying. My mom told me about the medical bills. Thank you. Claire stared at the message. Finally typed back, I'm glad you're getting help. Focus on your children. She didn't add forgiveness. Some wounds don't heal that way. But Jessica was trying. And that was enough to let go of active anger. Leaving the gallery, Claire passed a newsstand, a tabloid headline, Where are they now, the Ashford trial? 5 years later. She didn't buy it, had zero interest in Derek's prison life. That chapter was closed. Instead, she walked through the city she'd reclaimed, past couples holding hands, past families with small children, past ordinary happiness she'd thought she'd never access again. At St. Mary's Hospital, she paused. The emergency room where her baby died, where Derek chose betrayal, where everything detonated, but also where Dr. Pierce saved her life. Claire had donated $3 million to create the Augusta Vaughan Memorial Center for Pregnancy Loss Support. Counseling, support groups, resources for families navigating grief. She stood outside feeling genuine peace. Not absence of pain. Pain never fully leaves, but acceptance. The ability to hold it all, grief and growth, loss and learning, devastation and determination. Her phone rang. Victor. One more pitch, he said. What if we expanded beyond funding women's businesses, support for women escaping economic abuse, financial literacy, legal aid, emergency housing, real safety nets? Claire smiled, like turning personal experience into systemic change. Exactly, your story could help millions who don't have trust funds. Send me the proposal. I'm very interested. 3 blocks from home, Claire passed a young couple arguing, the woman crying, the man using that gaslighting voice that made your skin crawl. You're being crazy. I never said that. You always do this. Claire almost kept walking. Not her business. But then she thought about who she'd been a year ago, broken, manipulated, alone. She approached the woman. I don't know your situation, but if you need help, here's my number. She handed her a card with the crisis hotline. There are resources, free counseling, legal aid. You don't have to stay. The man sneered. Mind your own business. I am, Claire said evenly. She looked at the woman. You deserve better than someone who makes you doubt yourself. When you're ready, call. She walked away, heart pounding. Maybe the woman would call. Maybe not. But she'd planted a seed. That night in her penthouse, Claire opened her journal and wrote the final entry. Lesson 8, peace doesn't mean forgetting the storm. It means learning to dance when the rain returns. They tried to drown me. I learned to swim. Eventually, I learned to dance. That's not survival. That's transformation. She closed the journal and placed it beside her mother's notebooks. She looked at her reflection, a woman destroyed who'd rebuilt herself. Not the same. Better. Stronger. Wiser. More compassionate. More fierce. Somewhere in federal prison. Derek was counting days. 15 more years. He'd spend them thinking about the woman he'd underestimated. But Claire wasn't thinking about him. She was thinking about tomorrow. The foundation launching. Women she'd help escape. Entrepreneurs she'd support. Art classes she was teaching again. She poured tea, smiled at the Manhattan skyline, and whispered to the city, thank you for teaching me that falling isn't failure. Staying down is. Claire finally understood what her mother had always known. Money can buy security, comfort, revenge. But the most valuable currency is who you become when everything's stripped away. The strength you discover when you choose to bend instead of break. The compassion you maintain when you have every right to become cruel. Derek had taken everything he could touch her marriage. Money, home, safety, her baby's life. But he'd never touched her soul, never dimmed her kindness, never broken who she was. That's why she won. Not because she destroyed him, though she had, not because she got revenge, though justice was served, but because she refused to let his cruelty make her cruel. She chose grace over vengeance, growth over bitterness, purpose over pain. And that choice, that fundamental decision about who she would be in the face of evil, was the only victory that ever really mattered. Outside, Manhattan pulsed with life. Inside, Claire Vaughn stood at her window, finally free. Not because Derek was in prison, but because she'd learned that the best revenge isn't destroying someone who hurt you. It's building a life so beautiful, so purposeful, so full of meaning that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. She'd become someone her mother would be proud of, someone her daughter, had she lived, would have looked up to. And that was worth more than all the money, all the justice, all the vindication in the world.